In this video, I'm going to make 4 Futuristic Greebles. I'm calling these futuristic because they don't have a clear use beyond sticking them onto other things. I'm using 3 different thicknesses of cardboard, the thinnest being suitable for printers. I have an array of different sizes of hole punches, As I mentioned in the control panel video, I use the hole punches ahead of time and keep the results in labelled plastic containers. I have some plastic lids, this type is a flat top, which is what I want. These 12mm wooden beads, which are the only material I actually bought. And some cocktail sticks and bamboo skewers. I'm starting with a greeble that uses the plastic lid. First, I sand off the plastic nubs on the bottom. Next, I stick a 25mm diameter cardboard disc to the top of the lid with Gorilla wood glue. The 25mm disc fits almost perfectly on the top of these lids. Then a 16mm disc in the centre of that, and finally 3mm discs around it. I'm using 4, using my cutting mat to line them up. I'm adding the glue with a cocktail stick, applying it to the lid, wiping most of the residue off, then using the same cocktail stick to pick up the small disc and put it in place. I'm then cutting 4 lengths of cocktail stick. I'm using the edge of the mat where there are 1cm markings to cut them at 1cm long, rolling them under the blade to do the cut. Once cut, I lightly sand both ends. I'm applying the glue to the side of the lid running down from the 3mm discs, then adding the 1cm piece of cocktail stick there, ensuring that they're flat with the base. Here's the finished greeble. You can make a lot of variations, some of which I will show at the end. The next greeble uses the wooden beads, and I'm making 2 variations of it. I'm making 2 bases. The first is made from 2 16mm discs glued together, the second using a 10mm disc stuck in the centre of a 16mm disc. I appear to have forgotten to press record for the next bit. I glued a bead to each base, but with one of the beads, I first removed the end from a bamboo skewer and stuck it through the hole in the bead, using wood glue to keep it in place. For the bead without the spike, I'm covering the hole with a 6mm disc. I'm then gluing a 3mm disc in the centre of that. I then glue more discs around the base of each bead. 3mm ones on the base made from the 2 discs of the same size, 1mm on the other. These two are now finished. Again, there are many variations and I'll show some later. The third greeble starts with some thicker cardboard. I cut a rectangular piece that's 13mm by 25mm. I then cut a piece of skewer at the same length using a craft saw and a mini mitre box. Sand both ends and stick it in the middle of the piece of cardboard. If there are any splintery pieces, I remove them and make sure that part is on the bottom. Using the thin card, I think it's about 140 grams and an offcut I had kept, I cut a strip 5mm wide. I then cut 2 pieces longer than I need, gluing them across the card like brackets holding the skewer in place. Again, I looked to have forgotten to press record. Once the glue was dry, I removed the excess card with scissors. I then glued some 1mm disc to the thin card to represent rivets holding it in place. I also glued a 1mm disc to each end of the skewer for added detail. This finished this greeble, and again there are more versions I'll show later. The final greeble has 6 6mm lengths of bamboo skewer. I cut these with a mitre block and saw again. The piece of wood is held in place with blue tack to try and make the pieces the same length when cut. The ends are then lightly sanded. I glue the pieces together in pairs, then glue all 3 pairs together to make a 3x2 block. I cut an 11mm by 13mm piece of the thicker cardboard. I glued the block of skewer pieces to one end of the card. I then cut a piece of cocktail stick just long enough to reach from the middle skewer piece to the edge of the card and glued it in place. Finally, I glued a 3mm disc on each side of the cocktail stick. This finished this last greeble. This one has less variations. Once all the greebles are dry, I give them a coat in Mod Podge and black paint. I'm using Mod Podge in these cases to help lock all the small pieces in place. This would also be worth doing with the control panels from the earlier video. After the Mod Podge has dried and been touched up if necessary is a good place to stop. I should probably want to match the greebles paint job to whatever it's been stuck on, but I'm going to do some example paint jobs on these. First I paint them with neutral grey, which takes a few coats. Next I paint a few parts, such as the cocktail sticks and bamboo skewers, with gunmetal grey metallic. This next is grey, used to paint the wooden beads and some flat areas. Silver, which I use to paint the small discs as if they're rivets. I'm painting some of the small discs on one of the greebles black, and on another I'm painting the two small discs with red and green like indicator lights. one disc on top of a bead and painting red. The colours took multiple coats. I then used some gloss varnish on the colours to give them a bit of a shine like lights. I then used some burnt umber and a torn off piece of sponge held with tweezers to dab on some rust effects. Some homemade blackwash was finally used to add some grime. Here are the finished Greebles. These are some more with different paint jobs and styles. And these are some unpainted ones with different styles. For the lids, I've added different numbers, sizes and positions of discs and cocktail stick pieces. The bead Greebles will even fit nicely on top of some of the lid Greebles. These are versions of the bead Greebles. In some cases, I stuck 1mm discs onto the beads themselves, sometimes all over. There's not much variation for these, though you could alter the number of skewer pieces. This one has 2 skewer pieces, not just one. And this smaller one is done with cocktail sticks instead. Glamour shots are the painted and unpainted Greebles. You can make many different variations of these, and I've shown some examples. Want to help support the channel? Then please like, comment, subscribe, share, join our Patreon, or buying through the Amazon or drive-thru links below helps support the channel at no cost to you.